You've worked with literally thousands of victims of crime, and I'm interested in knowing what you think are some key lessons that you can share with the students.
Well, I began my career as a police officer, and so my initial dealings with victims were in a very practical way, very much crisis intervention. I learned very quickly that that intervention was really like making a temporary intrusion into a person's life, and their impression, not only of you as a human being, but also of the entire police department, was largely influenced by the way you treated them at that point. Like any other human being in crisis, victims of crime have some immediate needs, such as the need for safety, the need for shelter and food if they're escaping domestic violence, as an example. And they need to be attended to, and because the police were available 365 days of the year, 24/7, it meant that often police were called upon to be that immediate service provider. The lessons I learnt then was something that I have kept dear to my heart, but also in my mind, because it's always been my view that when you become a public official, as I did later in life, that you should never forget that the people who you are actually trying to assist, they should be your paramount consideration. There's a lot of discussion around providing for victims' psychological and emotional needs, and that discussion was influenced by the fact that most victim services began from a social welfare background or sort of emphasis in their ideology, and many of the staff who still work to these days in the area of victim support come from a social work background. The consequence of that is that sometimes there is a skewing in and that results in a mismatch between what victims actually need, very practical and material needs, and what can sometimes be offered to them. A classic example is someone who's just discovered that they haven't been a victim of fraud, that they no longer own their home, they no longer own their car, they have no regular income, and so they become quite destitute, and yet we often will say to them, well, we can give you free counselling and therapy, when in fact what they really need is assistance in dealing with those very fundamental needs that they have.